as far as 29% APR on your credit card, like that is a lot of money you're giving them. Because if you have $1,000 credit card, yeah, you're not just paying the $1,000. Every time you pay $100 off, they're still accruing interest on that. So like calculate how long that's going to take you to pay that off. You don't want to pay them, end up paying them $5,000 on this credit card that you only borrowed $1,000 on.
Welcome to the Money and Flow podcast, where avocado toast and stocks meet. Did you know that women and women of color don't talk that much about money? And did you also know that the health and wellness community is a $600 billion business? And did you also know that women aren't in the forefront when it comes to decision making with our health and wealth? We're here to change that. This is the first podcast that focuses on wellness and money. This podcast is targeted for women and women of color, specifically in their 20s and 30s. And without further ado, your host, Eugenie George. Hey, welcome to the Money and Flow podcast. It's a beautiful, freezing 8 degrees in Philadelphia. Love the weather, love life. Half of my friends are on the West Coast, and it's very hard looking at pictures. Anywho, for today's guest, we have For today's guest, we have Kenya Moses. She is the CEO and founder of BeFit Mama. She has a lot of really good information. Don't want to bore you with me just rambling right now. Before we do that, we're going to jump into our first mindful money tip. And yeah, after that, we'll dive right into Kenya. She is amazing and she made me laugh a lot, so you will hear a lot of laughter. Check it out. This is the first mindful money tip of the year. Super excited. Never implemented it before, but I want to make sure that if you're listening, you're going to get specific action items for your money. So today we're going to talk about wellness because everybody has these hashtag goals to be healthy. Everyone has fitness goals right now. People are trying to hydrate. That's one of my things that I'm working on. Everyone wants to become a better version of themselves, but oftentimes we forget that everything that we do costs money. So even going to a free running club, you had to take the train or you had to pay for gas to go to the free running club. All of that stuff costs money. So I'm going to help you understand why that's so important. You we all have to budget our health. One, because at the end of the day, if we don't budget our health, we don't really know what we're spending. And then the other piece is that if we don't budget our health, we actually end up getting more stressed out because we aren't aware of the things that we're spending. Now, there are a couple of tips that I want you to take a piece of paper down, write it down so that you can take this home with you. So the first thing is self-care. Self-care is a part of your health budgeting. It doesn't matter if it's going to get your nails painted. It doesn't matter if that means you're buying makeup. Beautifying yourself, making yourself feel better is a part of your self-care. So including that in your budget is beneficial because you can understand, okay, I have $2,000 this month, but I actually really want to get nail polish, which is probably going to cost like $10 to $15. I'm going to put that in my health budget category. So that's one thing. Include your self-care because at the end of the day, you do have to take care of yourself. And if that even means getting Botox, I'm just throwing out like the most far-fetched thing. I'm pretty sure that someone that gets Botox, I know it actually helps with migraines. So that is a part of your health bill and it should be something that you should prioritize. Now, you got your self-care. The second tip for your budgeting your health is actually look at your medical bills and see how much they cost. So for some of y'all, if you're a freelancer, it's a little bit easier because you can just actually look at how much you get paid on your bank account. If you are someone that has a job, a 9 to 5, look at your paychecks, your ACH checks. Most folks are now getting them paperless. So get your ACH check, look at it, and see how much your healthcare costs. Once you look at your healthcare costs, multiply it by 12. That way you can actually see how much your health costs. Just kind of get a big picture of where your healthcare is. The third thing is go to your bank account and actually look at all of your transactions to see where you're doing your health care or your self-care. By going back and looking at your old previous statements, you can see, oh, okay, I went to Target because I was super stressed out and bought myself a face mask that cost $5, $6. Actually looking at those paycheck stubs, you can kind of get a rough estimate of how much you spend on your self-care, how much you spend on your health, how much you spend on medication, whatever that may be. But kind of getting a big picture of your health is super, super essential, especially leading up to 2019. January, February, the flu season is mad crazy. So if you're actually aware of your spending, if you do get sick, you can prepare for that, right? So that's been your first mindful money tip. Super excited. If you have any questions with anything that's healthcare related, I'm not a complete specialist, but I do recommend a couple of folks that could help you with your healthcare. So one is Blair Duquesne. I think I'm saying her last name incorrectly, which is terrible because I'm from Louisiana. But anywho, Blair right now at probably one of the only female CFAs and certified financial planners, meaning like she knows stocks as well as helping people with their money. That's she's like a genie in a bottle, super rare. She talks a lot about healthcare and healthcare prices and what a HSA is, which is a health savings account. Check out her blog. I'll make sure I put it in the show notes. It's super, super beneficial. So there's that. If you want to, take down and disrupt the healthcare industry, there's a great podcast for that called An Arm and a Leg podcast, which talks about how there's a lot of discrepancies in the healthcare community. And the last thing that I want to say about the healthcare, which is just a little bit of a historical or history context. I know a lot of folks don't want to go to the doctor. I've talked to multiple people, and I'm included in it sometimes. I will make sure that that's the last resort. If you are super sick, please go to the doctor. Even if the hospital bills are mad crazy, go to the doctor, especially if it's happened for so long. At the end of the day, we do want you to be healthy, and we do want you to be happy. Oh my goodness. Thanks so much, Kenya, for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Eugenie. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, super, super excited. So we talked about this prior to recording, but I was really fascinated about your health story. So could you talk to the folks about that?
Yeah. So, in terms of my personal health or with business, what are you thinking?
I'm thinking we could do personal and then go into how it turned into a
Mhm.
business. Yeah.
Sure. Well, when I was loved candy.
Okay.
You're like, what? You're like, okay, most kids loved candy when they were little, but I loved candy so much, in fact, that I would sneak candy and I would go around the house and I'd leave wrappers like under the couch cushions and I would hide it because I wasn't supposed to have candy. And so that was actually the the first time that I realized that, there were certain things you were supposed to eat that were good for you and that were not good for you. And I kept getting in trouble. The more I got into trouble, I I also started gaining a lot of weight. So I guess the moral of this is that when I was little, I was a little chubby, and not just chubby. I was kind of fat for for a little girl.
Mhm.
And I started having some health issues, difficulty breathing, and but all the while I was also very active. I started ballet at a very young age, and I was also told at a very young age from my ballet teacher, actually told my mother that, your daughter just doesn't have the build to be a dancer, so she
Mhm.
should just stop. And to hear that as a little girl, and that probably contributed to my eating habits. Um, it really strikes you really hard. You may not understand what it really means, but that moment in time was the impetus of my eating and kind of some of the dysfunction that came along with that. So as I got older, I continued to dance, and there were periods where I was super thin because I was a ballerina and wasn't very healthy. But you need to look a certain way on stage, and also competing with those who just had this natural look about them on stage and moved a certain way. And so I really wanted to embody that. But at the same time, I also knew it wasn't healthy for me. And so this went through like my 20s, and then when I was in my mid 20s I got pregnant with my first son, so I have two boys.
Mhm.
And I knew then, I said, okay, something has to change, right? And so I basically created a health program for myself during my pregnancy and then after my pregnancy. And I met with some women who would ask me, how did you get through your pregnancy and eat so well, and then also be able to sort of not snap back, but also just have your energy. And I guess I just had that look on my face where I was happy to be a new mom. And I was walking down the street with the kids, they're like, how do you do that? And then I thought, oh, well, maybe I could share everything that I've learned throughout the years with them. And so from there, I came to a very healthy place in my own body, in my own mind. And then I started helping other women do the same. So I hope that answers.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's awesome. I mean, that's interesting. And I mean, you already have a lot of energy. I hear it in your voice. So I'm like, okay. But yeah, it's crazy. I This is my last week of doing the whole 30.
Okay.
And woo, that's been a definitely, restraining and restricting. But it is interesting how your thoughts and your behaviors behind what you eat are so important. Like, I'm a big fan of cake. Like, I
Hmm.
love cake. I enjoy baking it. I enjoy creating like Neiman Marcus bars. Like, I'm a big fan of sweets.
Sounds
And
delicious.
right, but this month I wasn't allowed to eat any. And I kid you not, I felt like temptations were always in my face. Like, I'm looking at the kitchen right now, and there's a piece of cake. There are two cakes in my house right now,
Earmarked for you.
right? No, but they're getting old now because it's been like 2 weeks. I've just been looking at them now at this point. They're probably stale. But anyways, but yeah, it's crazy how you create these patterns, and a lot of the patterns when it comes to your health, especially with like the candy, is that
Mhm.
that gives you some satisfaction. Like,
Right.
the
It's
cake is comfort. Yeah.
exactly. And that's, I think particularly Americans, we really go to food for comfort. And we do it when we're happy, we do it when we're sad, when we're depressed, when we're exhausted. We find that food that just makes us feel nice and warm inside, even for a moment. But that can, anything in excess can hinder whatever your goals are. So, for myself, I also love cake. And I love I love the cake, I love the breads, and I love sugar. And so, it's making a conscious choice, a conscious decision what you want to put in your body, but not neglecting that craving every once in a while, right? So we're
Right.
not depriving ourselves of like, I'm never going to have cake again. I can't have it, because then we're just going to resent everyone.
Right.
We see someone at a cafe having cake, and you're just going to glare at them and how dare you eat cake in front
Yes.
of me?
Yeah,
So,
that's true.
so that emotional eating is real. And as soon as we're able to acknowledge that, then we can morph it into something that's actually going to help us and then help nurture our body. And we can find better ways to nurture the body, to provide us more energy. I like to bake cakes, without sugar, but using maybe honey or agave. There's just different ways to transform the way we like those comforting foods.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I mean, next week I am gonna have regular cake because it will be around Halloween time, so I will have regular cake. But yes, I agree with planning it.
Yes.
Anyways, so I'm actually really curious because you have a practice where you're being fit and you're helping women about being fit and also being a mother. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So I started my business. It's called Be a Fit Mama. And it's mostly for women who are mothers. And essentially, I work with women to help them become their best selves from the inside out. And I think oftentimes we want to start on the outside first. You're like, okay, I need to lose 10 pounds. I need to tone up. I need to do all those things. And those are fine goals. Those are great. But most of the time, there's a reason why we have that extra 10 pounds. There's a reason why we're not as toned as we want to be. And it's typically an emotional thing. And that can be hard for some people to look at their life and say, okay, what part of my life is not, where I want it to be? Sometimes it's our career, our businesses, or it's our family. It's how we feel as a parent, as a mother. And so basically, I work with my clients to address those issues first. And then we start moving into the physical component, and then it just integrates together. And at the end, everybody's happy. You feel great. You've got great energy. And it's like we'll say, when we work on one area of our life, all the other areas of our lives come together.
Hmm.
So you'll notice, like, if you're feeling really dissatisfied in your career and you've been wanting to quit your job for 10 years. And then one day you say, okay, enough is enough. I'm going to quit. And you do it. And then the next day you wake up and all of a sudden you're like, I'm going to go for a jog, what you've never done before because that window hasn't been open and you haven't felt that release. So you can definitely start seeing how your world can completely transform when you start looking at the emotional aspects.
Yeah, that reminds me of what's her name, Brooke Castillo. She
Mm-hmm.
always talks about how your thoughts encourage your habits, and your habits encourage your beliefs, and your beliefs make your actions. So yeah, it is really true. I mean,
Yes.
yeah, you hit a nail on the head, especially when you're a mom. Like I'm always seeing. I remember when I first started teaching, there were multiple women that had kids and kind of looking at their life from point one, A, where at first they were out with us drinking all the
Mm-hmm.
time, and then to the point where when I would see them, they were very tired.
Mm-hmm.
And now some of them have their own businesses, which is interesting. I don't know how. It's very fascinating. I'm like, how do you do this? You're working, you're you are getting fit because this one particular woman is like in the oils industry,
Okay.
the essential oils.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's pretty interesting seeing that and watching people go through that too. So yeah. Um, okay. So how do you help people strategize with their well-being? Because that
Mm-hmm.
seems fascinating to me. A part of me wants to know more. Right?
You're like, I don't know, but yeah,
Yeah.
I'm all about strategy in everything. I constantly tell people, I live by my calendar, so whatever I have on my calendar, that's what's happening. So I put everything on my calendar, whether it's I'm going to yoga, I'm going to dance class, I'm picking up the kids from school. It is on my calendar, so there's nothing I ever miss. That might seem a little type A personality, but it works for me. But that's actually one of my biggest tips for anyone. So when we are trying to strategize how we're going to reorganize our emotional and physical selves, you really do need to start out by making a plan. Because if you don't make a plan, it's not going to get done and everything's all, half done and willy nilly, right? You say, oh,
Yeah.
yeah, maybe I'll go run tomorrow. Or I might, and then tomorrow comes and gone. And you're like, oh, I didn't do anything I intended on doing.
Hmm.
So one of the things first thing I say, okay, write it down. So it doesn't have to necessarily go into the calendar, but you're going to write it down. Committing to yourself, I do a little commitment ceremony for myself, and I say, I, Kenya Moses, commit to going to yoga 4 days a week, and go even as clear as Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday morning at 8 a.m. I'm going to go to yoga, or I'm going to do it at home. And then I'm going to do this, that, and the other. So being very clear and intentional about this is what I'm doing. And I'm committing to myself, and then writing down why you're committing to yourself. Because we can say I'm committing to myself, and in the big picture kind of thing, it's like, oh, because I want to be healthy. I just want to feel better in my body and all that. But there's a deeper reason why you want to get healthy. So if you're a mother and you want to get healthy, it's probably because, or at least this is one of your reasons, is because you want to be around for your children. Mm-hmm. You want to have enough energy to be with them and support them as they're growing, and so, and in turn, when they're older, and as you're getting older, they'll take care of you. But having what are my real core, deep down core reasons for doing anything will help drive you moving forward. So first is committing to yourself, write that down. And then make a game plan, but start small, be very realistic. So,
right.
We could say, yeah, every day I'm going to do this and I'm going to, but it's like, you know what? Okay, let's take a step back. And because it's malleable, right? This is a growth process. This is not an instant gratification thing, which I know most of us wish, we'd wake up tomorrow and be like, I lost 20 pounds.
Right. Yeah.
Because I thought about it before I went to bed, So it's really important that you set a realistic goal for yourself. And I try to say do incremental goals. So what are your first 3 incremental goals? So if your first goal is, I want to, I've always had difficulty walking up the flight of stairs to my office. I want to be able to get to the point where I can run up those stairs, no problem, don't feel winded, and I'm not sweating profusely when I get to the top, And then your next one could be, okay, I lost those 5 pounds. I have more energy. Obviously, you were able to get up the stairs. And then the third one could be, I feel good. Now, I'll not only feel good, but I've lost some weight and my clothes feel really good. And oftentimes that tends to be the first thing you notice is that my clothes start feeling nice. And just emotionally, you'll just start feeling a lot more open and calm about life in general. Things will start to just, brush off your shoulder. You've got a angry coworker or someone you don't like, or you usually feel stressed, and you'll start to notice that, that stress starts to just melt away and you don't get as triggered as easily.
Yeah, I love that. And they say if you don't write it down, it won't come true, which is crazy, right? You don't write it down. But what I was just reading too, just to add on that, is that there, on that sheet of paper too, you should also be honest with writing out what are your obstacles. And this is something that I used to really struggle with because, you just said yoga. Yoga is something I'm really struggling with here. Since I've moved to Philadelphia, I had one practice where I was going to hot yoga, and that was great. And then I stopped. It's not that I'm still meditating, but I stopped doing the actual yoga practice. So then I put it on my calendar. That's at night, you're going to do bedtime yoga. And I have not done it. And it's been on my calendar for a solid month now of doing bedtime yoga, because after I work out or anything like that, or when you're sitting for a long period of time, you're supposed to stretch out your back, do more stretches. And I haven't done that. So I'm wondering, what are my obstacles? What is holding me back from doing at least one day? I don't have to do 7, but what are the obstacles that are holding me back from literally just putting my feet on my toes? That's serious.
Well, that's really funny, but it's you're not the only person,
right? That's all I need to do. It's not even that serious.
All I have to do. So what do you find yourself doing instead?
Here's what I find myself doing. I find myself, one, stressing out about something that's unimportant. 2, right now I'm getting my MBA, and so I will wait until the last minute to do my papers, and I'm like, oh, okay, I have to do it at night. So by
Mm-hmm.
the time I'm done with writing the papers, I go to sleep. So there's no time. Now today is the first day that my paper is done this week.
Yay!
I know, right? Because I did it last night and I was like, okay. So now I have literally a 3-day window where I don't have to worry about a paper. Clearly I have to
Mm-hmm.
write another paper within the next like 2 days or 3 days, whatever. But like as of now, I have free time. So I
Mm-hmm.
feel like one of my obstacles is one, like my here's one of the positives is that my future kid, she enjoys there's like a kid yoga and
Mm-hmm.
she does it. And it's like a Frozen or something themed
Mm-hmm.
where she will do it. So the fact that she actively likes to do it, that made me do yoga last week. So
Wonderful.
maybe, right. And that was at night. So maybe my obstacle has always been like, I need some, even though it's a child, I
You need
need
a
some like,
buddy.
yeah, I need like an accountability partner. Because yeah, no one's pushing me
Mm-hmm.
to relax.
And that's great. And once you start, it becomes a habit again for you, then it's just going to be a part of your routine. And
Mm-hmm.
then, and when you're making that written commitment to yourself, I think in the beginning, if you're really struggling to do it, then reading that every morning. You wake up
Mm,
and you read it. And so it's in your brain as soon as you wake up. That's the best time to get that information in. And then so you're like, okay, I've committed myself to do this today. So, at the end of the day, can you look at your day and say, did I fulfill all the things that I wanted to do? And,
mm,
something, our calendars are super malleable and I'm a big proponent for that. But, this is your self-care. And self-care, I feel, is like the utmost important thing. Otherwise, all the other things don't matter because your body's not going to support you.
right.
So, mm-hmm.
And that's true too. Like I remember this is crazy, but this is how also I knew I was supposed to be in finance, is that I wrote a paper in high school and it was called uh healthcare disparities.
Mm-hmm.
And like I had written this whole thing. This is crazy. But I written this whole thing about like how healthcare in the long term is much more costly for a lot of people that don't have a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's some of the things that we take for granted in the sense of right now we feel healthy and we're young, but we're not thinking about kind of like the long term of how in the long term how it's going to affect us.
Yes.
Which I know
Yes.
bedtime yoga will make me
Mm-hmm.
calmer at night,
Yes, it
right?
will.
So yeah, okay. So since we're now on this like money topic, you
Mm-hmm.
said that you help women with their wealth.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as a mom, when you're in that caregiving mode, a lot of times you don't give you forget about yourself, which is great that you're talking about self-care. So
Mm-hmm.
what are like these wealth strategies that you're helping for with mothers?
Yes, definitely. So I grew up in a family where we didn't talk about money ever. All I knew when I went to college was that I shouldn't get a credit card.
Yep.
And that
Mhm.
was that was pretty much all I was told, like, don't get a credit card. And the first thing that I saw when I walked onto campus, and this was back in nine late 90s, there was like a row of credit card companies giving out free stuff. you know, Give us, fill out this credit card application and you get a t-shirt. Fill it out and get some candy. Or so, it was like, okay, this is awesome. I love college. You know,
Yeah, right. That's how they get you.
yeah. And so that was actually the start of my downfall for about a decade was when I stepped on college campus and I filled out those applications with the intention, this is in my mind, I'm like, oh, I'm just, once they arrive, I'm going to cut them up and throw them away. No, I was suddenly like, oh my gosh, I'm only 18 and I have 3 credit cards with a $2,500 limit. This is awesome.
Mhm.
I don't even have a job, and and
Yeah.
and that for me it was liberating because I felt like, oh, I'm an adult now, right? Because adults
Mhm.
have credit cards. But I didn't know how to handle that. I hadn't been told how to manage money and budgeting and all of that. And I even went into finance. I ended up at a year later becoming a financial advisor while working or while going to school, which is, it's all very ironic in the end.
I know, right? So
Yeah.
funny.
But so that was kind of the start of my money story and how it became very dysfunctional very quickly because I had no foundation. And so I've come across most women who come to me are entrepreneurs or small business owners, and they have a very similar story that they're like, I was never taught financial literacy. I didn't know how to budget. I don't know how to balance my checkbook. Yeah, I bounce checks all the time, or I'm overdrawn all the time. And it's feeling like hand to mouth, right? As soon as your paycheck comes, it's gone. Any money that comes in, it's gone. You have nothing to put into savings, and you're just feeling overwhelmed. Like, how do I manage this life? Especially when you're trying to create wealth for yourself now and for your future self and your children,
Mm-hmm.
right? So when I work with my clients, depending on what their concern is, we will start from the very bottom. We'll look at your credit score. We'll work on how do we build your credit score, understanding what it means, especially in this world today, how it's changing. And, most people are like, I have no idea what, a credit score means and how they calculate that. It's like the
Mm-hmm.
super, super secret. Like, how can I lose a point for this and then gain 15 for this when it does, things don't seem like that things are balanced. So I work with my clients with that. And then we start really going into the nitty gritty stuff of budgeting. These are like all foundational basic stuff. And then from there, we look at how do we really want to grow. So we look at our businesses and we go from, we look at the sales and the marketing of that and connecting them with those who can help them in that particular area
Mm-hmm.
and having a very strategic plan about it, knowing what our goals are, the incremental goals it kind of aligns with the whole wellness we just talked about.
Mm-hmm.
It's really having a strategy is number one, because otherwise no plan, you're just going to status quo or something doesn't go anywhere.
Right.
So we look at all those, we look at the foundation, we look at where you are now, where you want to be, and then we start looking at investments if that's something that they want to partake in. Not everyone is comfortable with, getting an advisor and creating a portfolio and all of that. But then we can talk about that if that's something that, a direction they want to go. So
Yeah.
I really just look at the entire picture, make sure that my clients feel really, really strong in their core and they're foundationally sound,
Mm-hmm.
and they know how to manage their money on a day-to-day basis so that as they're wanting to grow their business, they're wanting to get a business loan, or they, want to buy a house or buy a car or send the kids off to college, that they have the resources to do that. And if they don't have the money now, they know how to get it.
Yeah. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it's crazy. When I first started my business, no one had told me anything about any money. So I just literally ran it to the ground. After being the person that was like the person that knew how to save. You know what
Mm-hmm.
I mean? So it is interesting um what having access to clear financial learning or curriculum, how that can actually change a person. And it's crazy too, because you said you were afraid of credit cards, and my family kind of taught me that too, but they were more about like, don't do checking and cash. So
Mm-hmm.
then I had ended up going into Dave Ramsey's like camp. And I talk about this a lot in the podcast. It's not that I'm anti Dave Ramsey. It's just that after doing so many other money classes and talking to other people, and now I'm also trying to get my CFP. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that's why my mind's like, oh, okay, because it helps a lot of people.
Yes.
But I remember the biggest thing that they said was like, do not use credit cards,
Mm-hmm.
like cut them up. Don't do anything. So I didn't have a credit card at that time, and people don't realize that if you have a business and you have business credit, that could actually help you. That's how businesses thrive. Doesn't matter
Mm-hmm.
what, small, medium, large, that's how businesses thrive.
Right.
And that doesn't mean, that's not taking away from your money. That's actually really beneficial. And I think a lot of folks that are always like, pay off your debt is, I think it's good, but it's really important. And then the other thing is that people don't realize that a FICO score,
that's like created only like 30 some years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So people they think that it's so much bigger than them, but it's like FICO is younger than me.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Like it's actually a new thing, and the idea is to help you build wealth. Unfortunately, of course, people take advantage of that and take advantage of people, but
Right.
the idea is to help balance that out. And I think that's kind of where there's always gaps. So I think that's awesome that you're helping business owners, just because folks just aren't aware of it.
It's true. I mean, most people are not aware of it, and it just seems like this cut and dry thing. Like, oh well, I've got bad credit, so that's my lot in life, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, no, it's not your lot in life. Like, I've been there, you know. I tell my story. Like, yeah, I had these credit cards and went into a lot of debt, and then on top of that, I had student loans and you know, not working. I danced in New York for many years, and where I wasn't really making an income, but I still had debt. Debt didn't go anywhere. You know,
It's always sitting like a little bag.
Right?
It's always just hanging out.
Right? and
Crazy.
and so, but I came to a point where I'm like, you know what? No, I want a better life for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so teaching myself and teaching others, you know, you learn and you grow with the process. And as, you know, FICO changes, you know, they update how their scoring model is like every year, you know, so it's constantly like just keeping up with them, like, okay, what's the deal this week, you know?
Right. Yeah.
But there are some, you know, rule of thumbs that once you learn them, depending on what your particular credit story is, you know, will help you stay more balanced and just on top of things.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I think one of the biggest issues for me when trying to get back on track with my credit was that whole like paying the minimum balance of my credit cards, you know, and it felt very, what's the word? It just felt painstaking just to pay the minimum balance, right? Or even if I paid more, then I felt like, oh my gosh, then okay, now I have like $100 extra on the card. Now it's no longer maxed out, and then I immediately want to use it again. But until I got to the place where I realized that, Kenya, that's not actually your money. Like, you already use the money. You still need to pay back all the money that you spent. You just borrowed. Imagine you borrowed that from your mom or your sister or your best friend. Like, you got to pay it back.
Mm-hmm.
They probably would give you a low interest rate.
Right.
But now think of that like, okay, but now you've got what, 15, 17, 23, you know, some as far as 29% APR on your credit card. Like, that is a lot of money you're giving them, because if you have $1,000 credit card, yeah, you're not just paying the $1,000. Every time you pay $100 off, they're still accruing interest on that. So like, calculate how long that's going to take you to pay that off. You don't want to pay them, you know, end up paying them $5,000 on this credit card that you only borrowed $1,000 on. So, you know, it's like thinking about it and putting in perspective and thinking about what you could have done with all of that money that you've been contributing to this card every month.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really a mind shift, right? A mindset shift, and really looking at credit cards and money for what it really is. I mean, if we go deeper, like, money is energetic. It's something we created, and we've deemed, you know, these papers and this imaginary money in our accounts as, you know, something valuable. And that's how we trade for goods and services. And so if we could create that, like, you can create more of that. And so that's also what I help my clients with, just understanding that you have this money, but you can make it grow.
Right.
But first we have to start with the emotional component, kind of looking at why it's so difficult for us to move forward, why we continue to go through the same things over and over again, and we create these bad habits for ourselves, and overcoming them so that we can have the lives that we want for ourselves and for our kids.
Yeah. So I have a couple of questions to ask you, because this was a great interview. Was there any book or podcast or influencer that helped you with your money story?
I would say there is one person, and you've probably heard this before, one person that really made me look at my money story way before she got super famous.
Right. I guess I'm trying to guess in my head if she has blonde hair.
No blonde hair. No.
Okay.
It's not Susie or is that what you're thinking?
Yeah.
No, so Lisa Nichols.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
she's like the low key financial
Uh-huh.
person. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And I remember, did I read something? I think she didn't write something herself, but it was an introduction from, I used to get lots of self-help stuff,
Oh yeah.
and I think she had piggybacked on some sort of program, and I just fell in love with her. And I was like, she was a single mom. At the time, her son was really, really, really young. And her story just resonated with me. And she had I forget what the program was called, but it was very short, and it was kind of 28 days to money something or other. I forget what it is. Probably Google it and you can find it. But it really just made me understand why I was in the position I was in. And that was what set everything off, because, it's hard to look at yourself when things are not going so hot, like really look at yourself and say, okay, Kenya, you haven't been very responsible with money. You've been using credit cards knowing you didn't have the money to pay it back. And now you have this debt, you have collection calls, and you have all this stuff. But now that you've acknowledged that, you can move forward.
That's awesome. Oh, yeah, and you also have a podcast, right?
I have a podcast that's designed for single mothers, but it's really open, great information for pretty much anyone. It's called the Single Mama's Guide podcast. And we basically talk about pretty much everything from wealth building to parenting, relationships, self-care, well-being, all of that. And it's just a lot of fun. Very conversational, just like we're having a conversation right now. And I think that there's a lot of great information.
But where can we find you on social media?
Oh, the social media. I am on Facebook, and facebook.com/Kenya Moses author. And then on Instagram, my handle is just my name, Kenya Moses.
Perfect. All right. And I'll make sure I put that on the show notes. So thanks so much, Kenya. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I've had a lot of fun, and I hope that there was some good information out there for your listeners. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you.